Greetings. I am Brother Judah from the Congregation of Israel, or Moreh Yehuda. I'd like to welcome all of the listeners to our podcast, What is to be Done? Here we investigate geopolitical, historical, biblical, and social and other scientific content. We approach the Bible from a socio-political perspective, and we argue this is the appropriate way to approach the Bible because the Bible deals with nations and kings and civilizations and societies. And so we argue this is the appropriate way to approach the Bible to understand its context and narrative. We hope to be doing a discussion on There Was a War in Heaven and present that from a social political perspective to explain historically the ideas and the figures of speech of the writers in the ancient Near East. Because we're going to look at a war that's waging right now, is raging on. And many of us don't understand the tactic or the manner of the war being waged. We want to talk about the fight for political power. Our focus again will be on the so-called Democrats and Republicans. We argue that the Democrats and Republicans, in essence, in fact, concretely, not abstractly, the Democrat and Republicans are denominations. The Nicolaitans, in fact, they are run or overseen by the ruling elite. The definition of Laitans, or the Nicolaitan, at least the etymology, the structural etymology in Greek, literally translates to conqueror of the people. And this pursuit for political power between the two parties, which is actually one party, it is in their pursuit for political power. Before we begin, we want to look at and listen to an elder in the struggle for many years, Elder Harry Belafonte. And he is actually going to argue the call for the people to break the chains and turn yourself loose from the paradigm of the Democrat and Republican denominations and their struggle or fight for political power. And then we want to investigate to find out a little bit more about these denominations. Bear with us a moment.
Harry Belafonte, thank you. Thank you for a lifetime of commitment and struggle. And it's,
Thank you.
there is no one who has traveled as far
Yes.
in terms of being there for the people, not just in these great United States, but throughout the continent of Africa, Asia, Europe, throughout the Caribbean, and has never backed away from controversy. A man who is the 21st century's example of the great Frederick Douglass, who speaks truth to power. And you should know that we not only appreciate it, but we respect what you do and what you stand for, unbought, unbossed, and unbowed. That is unique in America today. Thank you. Mr. Belafonte, having traveled, you've been down to Louisiana, we've seen you, having addressed some of these issues, what do you want to appeal to this audience to do, and to America watching this? What do we need to do to make sure that the issues that we have witnessed over the last month are not allowed to disappear? What's our charge from you?
You know, the last thing Dr. King said to me before he was murdered was in my home when we were sitting planning strategy for the Poor People's Campaign, which was on the horizon of the politics of the day. That's why he went to Memphis. And in the course of that meeting, he seemed distracted and a little under-focused. And when we asked him what was the matter, Martin said, you know, I've been thinking long and hard about our struggle. We worked tenaciously for our rights. And the culmination of all that effort will be reflected in what we've come to call the integration movement. And I sit here deeply concerned that I suspect we are leading our nation on an integration trip that has us integrating into a burning house. I don't think we quite understood how pathetic that remark was. After all, we're in the midst of a very heady moment in our struggle. We were winning on a lot of frontiers. Bull Connor had been confronted. The bus boycotts had worked. Votes were coming. Even Lyndon Baines Johnson had been struck by the spirit and got up and talked about we shall overcome in the Congress. And for Dr. King to have been in this place at a time when we seemed to have been making great headway was a moment to pause and reflect. That reflection has taken longer than I had suspected it would, but it has certainly come to reveal itself fully when we look at the condition in which we find not only our world, but in particular, our nation. The wreckage that's taking place down in the Gulf region, in the southwest part of the United States, is not the only wreckage that exists. We have a lot of wreckages around this country. And perhaps the most distracting and perhaps the most important wreckage to take a look at is really the wreckage of the Democratic Party.
Get him to the stage.
I've been a Democrat all my life. I have no treaty with the Republicans, nor do I really seek one. But the Democratic Party was not always our friend. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we had to struggle against was in the possession and the power of Democrats who came from the South. And when we showed them the tenaciousness and the conviction and the sense of great purpose that the people of this nation had into transforming our condition, all those Democrats from the South ran off and became Republicans as an act of punishment for what we were trying to achieve as a people. And that punishment continues to play itself out. Eleanor Roosevelt was a close friend, and once sitting in Hyde Park with her, she told a story about a great black leader by the name of A. Philip Randolph. He was one of the great giants of the century, certainly one of the great thinkers. And she recalled an evening when A. Philip Randolph had been invited to a dinner at the White House. And just he and her and the President, Franklin Roosevelt. And during the course of the dinner, the President invited Mr. Randolph to speak his thoughts And for a long time, A. Philip Randolph held forth on every list of grievances he could think of, for the people in the labor movement, for the people who were poor, for black people, and Roosevelt permitted him to hold forth without any interruption until he concluded. At the end of it, Roosevelt reached for a box of cigars, passed one around to Philip, and as he slowly lit the cigar, he turned to Philip Randolph and he said, "Philip, let me tell you, I've heard everything you've said. I've missed absolutely nothing. And there's nothing that you've said that I disagree with. And I do, in fact, have the platform to be able to make the transformation work that you're looking for, and I guess we're all looking for. I have just one request of you, and it is for you to go out and make me do it." It seems to me that there'll be no loftier statements and no greater speeches to be made than have already been made. Certainly Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Fannie Lou Hamer down in Atlantic City when she challenged with the Freedom Mississippi Democratic Party. There are a lot of people who have made speeches that are as eloquent as will ever be written. And we've listened to a lot of redundancy. A lot of people who have carefully selected the phrases and applied them to the moment. What eludes us is the bankruptcy of the action itself. This poverty that our country is witnessing has never gone away. Most of the politicians I know of have visited these places of poverty. They make it their business when they're running for the highest office in this nation to go into the heart of our pain, our anguish, our indignities, and make promises only to walk into the places of power and then deny us. I guess part of the reason I'm here is to really look through the ravages of the Democratic Party and see if anything is really worth salvaging. Because when Dr. King said, "We're integrated into a burning house," we said to him, "What do we do about it?" He said, "We're just going to have to go out and become firemen." Well, maybe that's what my humble task is, to find the truck, get the hose, and know where to turn it on. This country reveals its moral decay every day of its existence. Our prisons, the largest prison system in the world, are filled with those who are the victims of poverty. The women who are disenfranchised, young teenage mothers, are victims of poverty. Poverty is knocking at our door all day long. It sits in the mirror for us to look in every morning. When we look at what's going on with the schools in this country, we build more prisons than we build schools. We have more young black men and women in the prisons of America than we have in the universities. Poverty is in our face all day long. Why is everybody behaving all of a sudden like this is some great revelation?
He is here? Are they both here right now?
And I'll tell you something, there's a lot of people out here who are really pissed off. We are angry, we're upset, we're sad. We hold our children, we wheel our wheelchairs, we look around for some comfort, and we don't find any. Well, we have to look to ourselves, because I think the last frontier of truth and hope in this country are the people themselves. And I think our honorable senator is absolutely right. I'm not that much interested in 06. It's just another date for a lot of rich folks and a lot of anger, and for a lot of opportunists and a lot of people to go out and do their thing yet again. I'm interested in something much bigger, something much longer, and it's going to take much more time than just '06 to fix it. You know, we look at these things in terms of sound bites and short-term efforts. It's going to take longer than that. And I think we have to serve notice that we're looking for a second party. Some people have suggested two exist. I say there's really one. It comes in various grades of difference. The American
The elder, the distinguished Harry Belafonte, he said he's looking for a second party. Harry Belafonte, understanding this fight for political power, said that the people has a bankruptcy of action. No action. A lot of talk. He gave this account of Philip A. Randolph, and we're going to read some of the work of Philip A. Randolph in his papers or magazines or booklets called The Messenger. And Philip A. Randolph, as Elder Belafonte said, that he was before the president. And the president told Philip A. Randolph, I've heard your grievances. I can't say I disagree. I agree with everything you said. I have the platform, meaning the political office. Now go out and make me do it. And that's when Harry Belafonte argued that we have this bankruptcy of action. Philip A. Randolph was active. And part of his work was to get the other people active in this fight for political power. And as Elder Harry Belafonte argued, there's only really one power or one political party. The Democrat and Republicans are of the same. They're just two denominations of the same faith and religion and dogmas. Political power. Did these parties just drop out of the sky? People are stuck in this paradigm of the two-party system, which really isn't a two-party system. We believe it is. It's important for us to understand that the political parties you see today put work in to get there. One of the first parties that we would like to look into is the Democratic Party. We want to look into the Democratic Party. Our goal here at the Nazarene Messianic Party, the NMP, is to teach political education. And we argue that there should be a global liberation for all people, and this comes through the fight for political power. Thus, we are the biblical school of global liberation for all oppressed people. This is what we teach. This is what we argue. If you want more information on what we deal with and what we teach, you could reach out to us. But for today's session, we want to investigate the parties in existence today. The parties in existence today, primarily the Democratic and Republican Party. Let's start with the Democratic Party. Let's start with the Democratic Party. In fact, in order for us to really understand the Democratic Party, we're going to have to look into the origins of the Democratic Party, which leads us back to the Federalist. The origin of the political parties, Hamilton versus Jefferson. The Democratic Party is the oldest political party in the United States and among the oldest political parties in the world. It traces its roots to 1792, when followers of Thomas Jefferson adopted the name Republican to emphasize their anti-monarchical views. The Republican Party, also known for its Jeffersonian Republicans, advocated a decentralized government with limited powers. Another faction to emerge in the early years of the Republic, the Federalist Party, led by Alexander Hamilton, favored a strong central government. Well, the Federalist Party fell through. The Democratic Party, it continued. And at first, they were called the Democratic Republicans. This is not to be confused with the Republican Party that was organized in the 1800s. Okay? Don't confuse them. They're different. But nevertheless, if we follow through with this, the Federalists, the first political party, Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury, believed in a centralized government and the importance of a fiscally sound nation. He founded the Federalists in the early 1790s, composed mostly of bankers and businessmen. So this was the first manifestation of a capitalist party, organization, church. Yes, church. Church that you find in your Bible comes from the word ecclesia, which is a Greek word signifying the political organization of male citizens over 20. So they're not going to use the word church, but church and party is synonymous, politically, literally. So the denomination of the capitalist religion, one of the first denominations that rose up, was the Federalist Party. The Federalist Party, early U.S. national political party, again, which favored the bankers and the businessmen. Okay? Remember, these parties serve mammon. Again, just for the context, these parties that we are looking at, and we believe that that these excuse me, we believe that these parties, I don't want that one, are separate from church and state and all this other business, and you don't realize that church itself is a political term. All of this misinformation leads to confusion. We want to straighten it out a bit. The Federalist Party served and had the bankers as their best interest. Why? because of the making of profit as the ultimate sole purpose of mankind. This is from Karl Marx text, Capital, Volume 1, the Penguins edition, page 918. He says, "It was the strange God who perched himself side by side with the old divinities of Europe on the altar, and one fine day threw them all overboard with a shove and a kick. It proclaimed, this strange God, it proclaimed the making of profit as the ultimate and sole purpose of mankind. And this is the principle or system of beliefs held with ardor and faith of the Democratic and Republican parties. This is their religion, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Religion, a cause, principle, or system of beliefs held with ardor and faith, and the banker system of beliefs proclaimed as their God, strange God proclaimed. If threw all of the other superstitions and dogmas of Europe overboard when it declared the separation of church and state, and people don't really quite understand the fallacy in that statement there. But it proclaimed the religious adherence to this strange God. It proclaimed the making of profit as the ultimate and sole purpose of mankind. Thus, we have the Federalist, composed mostly of bankers and businessmen with full ardor for the making of profits. The Federalist Party, or church, or assembly, or group, early U.S. national political party, church, assembly, or group that advanced a strong central government and held power from 1789 to 1801. During the rise of the country's political party system, the term Federalist was first used in 1787 to describe the supporters of the newly written Constitution who emphasized the federal character of the proposed union. Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison wrote a series of 85 essays that appeared in various New York newspapers attributed to the pseudonym Publius, the Federalist Papers. As the combined essays are called, they were written to combat anti-federalism and to persuade. Their doctrine and ideology was to persuade the public of the necessity of the Constitution. And that's true. They had to have a body of laws to go by. All right? The same thing with the children of Israel. They had a body of laws called the Constitution. We have a paper, actually, where we have the definitions and the comparisons of what God caused Moses to establish and its political significance and what it will be called today. They set up a constitution. They had a federal government. They had a 12 tribal or nation state confederacy, much like the United States. But nevertheless, those are other discussions. But the fight for political power rests in the power of persuasion. That's important for those of us who study the messianic concept and the political language of the elect servant and the sword which proceed out of his mouth. Those are other discussions as well, hopefully we can have. Now, these are the Federalists. The Federalists did not last. They fell to the Democratic Party. The Democrat, or the Democratic Republicans, the opposing party, they opposed the Federalists. Again, the Democratic Republicans, the usage of Republican isn't the same Republican Party that started in the 1800s. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison disagreed with the beliefs of the Federalist Party. They established the Democratic Republican Party, which appealed to farmers, planters, artisans, rural Southern populations. So when you're looking at here, farmers, at this time we're looking at the agricultural capitalist. Not like the farmers you may see today, a little house on a prairie business. The farmers are the large-scale business agriculturalists. They were the slavers. They were the capitalist planters in rural Southern populations. Now, the Democratic Party is the oldest political party in the United States, among the oldest political party in the world. Again, it traces its roots back to 1792, when followers of Thomas Jefferson adopted the name Republican to emphasize their anti-monarchical views. These are the Democrats. So there was a dissent among the Democrats. Why is it important for us to understand this? These parties didn't come out of the sky. These parties and organizations or churches or groups, they form because of the struggle and fight for political power. So they had to organize for their voices to be heard. You can't escape this process. You can't sit on the sideline and argue who not doing what for you. For example, the so-called African American. I've heard this foolishness with the FBA argument. Some of their arguments is understandable. Some of the argument is foolishness. They argue that FBA, Foundational Black Americans, rightfully so, they are upset at the fact that you have immigrants who come here and take advantage of the benefits that was made available by the struggle of their ancestors, and not just Black American ancestors. There was a lot of people in the marches and protesting. A lot of different ethnicities and races who participated in the Underground Railroad and the abolitionists. But they took advantage of the gains in which the foundational Black American ancestors fought for. That's true. Now, the dilemma we have today is that the foundational Black Americans and the immigrants who's clashing are simply those who are the apologists for capitalism. They strive to be a part of this religion, and they seek to worship that strange God whom Jesus called Mammon. And instead of them coming together, they're arguing over the resources and the spoils of Mammon. But in order to get these spoils, you need political power. And so the migrant come over and he organized for political representation and he fight for political power. The FBA, many of them, on the other hand, feel they don't have nothing to do with politics. And they so backwards, they really think that's a good idea, not to deal with politics and to turn their nose up at it. They did the same thing when Martin was alive. They did the same thing when Dr. King was alive, and all of the others who have been trying to tell the so-called foundational Black Americans that in order for you to receive freedom and liberation and equitable distribution of resources, you need political power. So most of the foundational Black Americans, is argued, doesn't participate in the political process. Most, they say. But you have the immigrant who does. And he get in office, or she gets in office, and then they fight for their community. And so you sit on the sidelines, many of you, and some do. Some you do. You have quite a few Black, so-called foundational Black Americans who do fight for political power. But their error, and their fault is that they're capitalists at heart. But the Democrat, Republican, whoever that the immigrant, wherever they may be from, Caribbean islands, wherever they may be from, South America, yeah, they come, they get the seat of power, and they use their power to continue to fight and make the voices heard for their communities. Why do you foundational Black Americans think that they're supposed to do that for you? Because you haven't taken advantage of what your ancestors have put forward. You sit on the sideline trying to make a Democrat or a Republican to do something for you. You sit on the sideline. Access have been given for you to grab your battle axe and go on the battlefield. Access have been given to you to go out in the forest and build. You sit on the sideline and let everybody else go out in the forest and wonder why they're not building a damn thing for you. Get off your behind, put your arrogance and pride to the side, learn and understand and participate, or else, as Harry Belafonte said, you will remain in the bankruptcy of action. So these political parties, Democratic Republicans is what they were first called, Federalists, they all put work in. They put work in, and for you to believe, oh, well, they do this to you, they do that to you, that is a fallacy from hell, because that never stopped our ancestors before. They wasn't threatened in the struggle for power. Today, our real problem is that we have been deluded and persuaded by the Black bourgeoisie to not go further in our political endeavors for liberation, but settle with their tokenism. And they're nothing but Negro overseers. But we'll get to them too. The fight for political power. Democrat and Republicans. Democratic Republicans, 1792. There was another party that arose, the Whigs, the Whig Party. The Whig Party in the U.S. history, or in U.S. history, major political party active in the period 1834 to 54, that espoused a program of national development, but foundered on the rising tide of sectional antagonism. The Whig Party was formally organized in 1834, bringing together a loose coalition of groups united in their opposition to what party members viewed as the executive tyranny of King Andrew Jackson. They borrowed the name Whig from the British Party opposed to royal prerogatives, and this is from Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, if we go further into a text, American Government 101. American Government 101. 1. And let's look at this a bit. This is by Kathleen Sears. And she is also going to give us a history on page 180. The evolution of the Democratic Party. Now, let's analyze this carefully, because there is a fight for political power. We don't seem to be in it, but we're going to have to. And believe it or not, this is what the Bible teaches. But you might not know that if you're not around people who approach the Bible from a socio-political perspective. And whether we're right or wrong, I'm sure plenty of people say that we're wrong. But we say, come and find out. We're willing to present our position, no matter who it is. Atheist, non-atheist, Democrat, Republican, Muslim, Protestant, Catholic, don't matter. Well, what we find here says, at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, delegates coalesced around two general principles while writing the Constitution. The Federalists supported a strong national government, while Anti-Federalists were interested in preserving the state's autonomy. Now, we found that the Federalists failed to innovate or make inroads, and they faltered. They fell through. The Democratic Republicans believed that the federal government lacked the constitutional authority to implement Hamilton's agenda. The Democrat, as they would eventually become known, supported an agrarian-based economy that promoted the well-being of farmers and tradesmen, or as we read, artisans. These are the planters, the farmers, and also the tradesmen who labored and worked. But their bread and butter was the capitalist slaver, the capitalist farmer. But the Democrats fell through. They had a division. Okay? Now, the Democrat Republicans came to dominate the political landscape, so much so that James Monroe presidency would become known as the era of good feeling. Intra-party squabbles, however, soon led to the factions within the Democratic Republican Party. Although war hero Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, he failed to receive a majority of electors in the Electoral College. Jackson's supporters were outraged by the backroom deal-making and splintered off to form the Democratic Party, reviving the old Jefferson coalition of farmers and tradesmen. The Democrats effectively organized at the national. They put work in. They effectively organized at the national, state, and local levels, forming clubs and committees, sister churches, sister chapters, organizations, political parties. This is what makes it grow in this fight for political power. They did not fail in this. They effectively organized at the national, state, and local level, forming clubs and committees, holding rallies, establishing a chain of newspapers, and raising money for their candidates. Their rallying cry was the elimination of corruption in Washington. So that was the movement of the Democratic Party. But remember, we started to learn about the Whigs. Supporters of President Adams, when we're looking at the Whigs, the Whig Party supporting of President Adams responded by cobbling together the remaining factions of the Democratic Republican Party with remnants of the old Federalist Party. The Whigs, as they became known, lacked the Democrats' organization and were soundly defeated in 1828 to 1832 and 1836. They scored their only presidential victories in 1840 and 1848 with war heroes William Henry Harrison and Zachary Taylor, respectively. While the parties were consistent in their economic policy, the Whigs supported a national bank and tariffs that protected manufacturers. So the Whigs party, they also supported the bankers who were capitalists, but the Democratic Party or church, or as we said before, the Democratic and Republican denominations. One supported the capitalist planter, the other one supported the capitalist businessman. The Democrats opposed the bank and advocated low tariffs that help farmers, which are the capitalists. You gotta put that context in there. These are the capitalist farmers, the slavers, the cotton growers, okay, the cane crops. All right. This is what we're looking at when we're dealing with the farmers. But they couldn't work in. They were not bankrupt in action in their struggle for political power. So the Democrats both were badly Democrats, and although both tried to suppress slavery from becoming a national issue, this proved impossible as feelings and emotions intensified. Many Northern Whigs, including Abraham Lincoln, joined the newly formed Republican Party, and by 1856, the Whigs were no more. You see the rise and fall of parties and the fight for political power? History shows that the people put the work in. Harry Belafonte argued that we're in need of another party because the Democrat and Republicans are one party. They belong to that one religion, capitalist. They're just different denominations within it. But they put work in. They were not bankruptcy in their action. And that political power, our ancestors fought and made gains, and we have access to it. We just don't grasp it in its totality. And those of us who do strive for it, we carry the same sentiment and ideology as the Whigs, as the Democrats, and the Republicans. Now, Harry Belafonte, Elder Harry Belafonte, mentioned a man named, he mentioned an individual, Mr. Randolph, Philip Randolph. We're going to look at some of his work today out of the Messenger newspaper. Before we do, we want to follow up with this newly formed Republican Party so we can see how political organizations were formed. And here we want to go to a text, American History in Black and White. American History in Black and White. And this is by David Barton. David Barton. And we'll go to page 21 and look what Mr. Barton describes. Following the passage of these pro-slavery laws in Congress in May of 1854, a number of anti-slavery Democrats in Congress, along with some anti-slavery members from other political parties, including the Whigs, Free Soilers, and Emancipationists, formed a new political party to fight slavery and secure equal civil rights for Black Americans. The name of that party? They called it the Republican Party because they wanted to return to the principles of freedom and equality first set forth in the governing documents of the Republic before pro-slavery members of Congress had perverted those original principles. See, it took time for me to realize that there must be a separation between the seats of power and those who sit in the seats of power. The United States government framework is very interesting. The framework itself is patterned after the Iroquois Confederacy. And the framework is very, very interesting and socialist in nature, actually. But if you don't really know what socialism and communism is all about, then you may think what I just said was just off the rocker. But if you are interested in learning and understanding, you will look it up. Meanwhile, we have those who sitting in the seats of power going back and forth. They are the Democrats and the Republicans. If we go to the Messenger, March 1923, the issue of March 1923, Political Parties and the Negro by William Pickens, he says, the Republican Party was born in 1854 and triumphed in 1860. It was then a radical party. In fact, they were actually called the Radical Republicans. But Mr. Pickens said it was then a radical party. It had a mission. It took this new party to lift the Negro out of his physical slavery. It will take another new party to complete his political, economic, and social emancipation. And this is what Elder Harry Belafonte was arguing. Harry Belafonte made reference to Philip A. Randolph, and I wonder how many people in the audience actually knew who Philip A. Randolph was. I know I did not until I heard it from Harry Belafonte. And then I began to look up Philip A. Randolph, and then the message that Elder Harry Belafonte gave to the Democratic, in the Democratic Convention was even yet that more powerful. And the jewels he was dropping, if people in that audience was to pursue Philip A. Randolph, he called him a giant. And not only that, the ideas of Philip A. Randolph, who was a socialist and communist, the ideas of Philip A. Randolph, even the president said, listen, I agree. Now make it happen. That means that it's going to take you, just like it took work of the people to make the Whigs, to make the Federalists, to make the Democratic Republicans, just like it took their work and effort. Why do you think you could sit on the sideline, those of you who want freedom and liberation, and demand it from someone else? No, they're going to work in their behalf. Now you must organize and work in your behalf. The Republican Party was born in 1854. Again, it triumphed in 1860. It was then a radical party. It had a mission. It took this new party to lift the Negro out of his physical slavery. It will take another new party to complete his political, economic, and social emancipation. In fact, It is the need that produces the party. And that is what's interesting about the Trump administration. I don't believe Donald Trump is a Democrat or a Republican. He's quite an anomaly. And I definitely don't agree with a lot he says because he's running on the capitalist platform. But one thing he has done in shaking up the capitalist world, because that's what capitalists do. They war, they fight. Who will seize the opportunities? There has been a great opportunity that has arisen. That is, people are recognizing the need of another party. Can the evangelist seize on that momentum? See, people worry about their pocketbooks. They don't understand this. And I tell people who's concerned with their pocketbooks and keep looking at people's pockets and how much making this and who doing that. I said, did you know Abraham Lincoln himself, he lost a popular vote, but Abraham Lincoln, according to some, was the most terrible president they ever had. Hopefully we're going to do discussions on Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln instituted an income tax to fund the troops in the war. Abraham Lincoln and his administration totally caused the world economy to be thrust into an arrested development. Factories closing, commodities, global commodities at a standstill, cotton quota for the capitalists undermined, people losing their jobs. Abraham Lincoln was a disaster to the capitalist economy. But for the abolitionists who could understand and read the political winds, Abraham Lincoln movements was an asset. So, as Mr. Pickens, the elder, William Pickens, argues, it will take another new party to compete or to complete. It will take another new party to complete the Negro's political, economic, and social emancipation. In fact, it is the need that produces the party. The two dominant parties of the present have been so long associated together that, like two old married people, speaking of Democratic Republicans, ironically enough, they actually formed the archaic name of the original Democrats, Democratic Republican. That is the irony. But nevertheless, he said they're like two old married people. They have become just alike in all their ordinary aims, desires, and ambitions, and are capable of no greater differentiation from each other than in an ordinary family fuss. Because they all serve the same thing, mammon. This is their ultimate goal, and that's why we keep failing when we follow any of these parties. When we follow any of these religious denominations of the capitalists, we fall right back into this. And there is no justice for all with such a universal selfishness, this service of mammon. The God, the strange God, who proclaimed the making of profit as the ultimate and sole purpose of mankind. There is no salvation there, only suffering and plunder. And once you stop blaming different ethnicities, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, immigrant, once we stop blaming ethnicities and our brothers and sisters from different places, and that can only happen once ourselves and our brothers and sisters in different places no longer pursue the religion of mammon and seek to be a part of the denominations of capital, of capitalists, known as the Democrats and Republicans. Other than that, we're just in between their fuss as they figure who's going to be the next gold gatherer. The minority Negro vote attains its highest potential power in American politics only when it assumes an open-mindedness toward all parties and appeals. Once it is preempted and owned, once the Democrat or Republican come take your vote, that's why they can gerrymander. Gerrymandering would not work as a tool to guarantee partisan victory if the population stopped voting for the two major political parties. That's how you lose your power. Negroes, Black, FBA, Foundational Black American, you done lost their power already as soon as you handed it over to the denomination of Democrat. And then if you don't want to give your offerings to the Democrat, you give them to the Republican. And so Elder Pickens argued that the minority Negro vote attains its highest potential power in American politics only when it assumes an open-mindedness towards all parties and appeals. You got to understand what they are about. And this will lead you to produce your own party. Once it is preempted and owned, once your vote is preempted and owned, its power disappears. It becomes serviceable when it is owned chiefly among the maneuverings of the corrupt politicians within the parties. The present ultra-partisan Negro politician can only serve his masters and save his hide. And that's what we have. That's what we have among us. Just seeking to save their own hide. What we have to do is understand the goals and ambitions and how the pursuit of wealth will continue to divide the people when the people of the world, we the people, should unite. But the present ultra-partisan Negro politician, he's going to keep pushing racism, and just like his counterpart, they're going to keep the people divided. And all in the meanwhile, while they're doing that, the overseers and the disruptors, those who are devout partisan followers of these two denominations, Republican and Democrat, they walk with a fat purse to the banks. All in the meanwhile, they really don't care about the people. When they're saying the black people losing their power of the vote, they're making your vote synonymous with their Democratic Party. They're making it synonymous when in fact they're two different things. But once you have given your vote over to them, they're arguing the black people are going to lose their voting power from the Voting Act of 1965. No, you're going to lose your seats. But you can't say that, can you? Because you know that the people who are partisan will continue to vote for the same party because they have given their voting power over to that said party. So this whole gerrymandering, it only works because of the two-party system. It only works because of economic disparity. It only works because of marginalization. And once you get rid of economic disparity, class marginalization, and the two-party system, then we are on our road to freedom. I'm Brother Judah, a member of the Congregation of Israel, a representative of the NMP, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to What Is to Be Done. Here we investigate geopolitical, historical, social, and scientific content. We hope to come again with more content and more discussion. And if you want to reach us, if you're interested in our classes, you can reach us by the information that have been appearing on the screen. And we should have links to our website so you can join if you're interested in learning more or asking questions. And what I mean just join on the website's sign-up sheet. Okay, not necessarily join the group. You got to learn about the group. So that's not what I'm implying. I'm saying sign-up sheet, join the sign-up sheet. You can learn more about it, and you can go from there. All right. Bring your arguments, your concerns, or your contributions. So with that, I'm going to close out for the day. Most High willing, we'll return again with more discussions. And I'll say to all of you who are sincerely searching, may the Almighty bring you into truth. And all of you who are sincerely searching for truth and understanding, he that hath an ear, let him hear, because it is written by the master teachers, the truth will make us free. Until the next time, we pray to meet again.